This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on motion of thanks to President's address. The participants are Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and K.V. Prasad, senior journalist.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi replied to the motion of thanks to the President's address to both houses of Parliament. It's both complementary and supplementary because in both the houses, members of Parliament do get time to articulate their party positions and viewpoints on what the President of India said in terms of the policies, programs and the vision of the government for the year that comes up. Tandon Sahab, you've witnessed many such parliament sessions and also a response by the Prime Ministers. If one were to characterize the response of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in both the houses of Parliament, yesterday in Lok Sabha and today in Rajya Sabha, what are the broad takeaways that you would like to mention?
Well, if I may say so, it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi all the way in both houses of Parliament, yesterday in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha today, as far as his reply to the debate on the motion of thanks is concerned. I personally feel that Prime Minister's two personality dimensions were visible. One was of a statesman with a global vision, at the same time unsparing in attacking the opposition, particularly in the context of the charges leveled by the opposition against his government are concerned. I would like to focus first on his persona as a statesman of the international stature. In fact, he was sharing with the House that a new world order after the COVID pandemic is emerging, and the world is now moving very fast toward this new world order and new system. And India should not miss this opportunity. It's a perfect time during our Amrit Mahotsav to think about how India can play a global leadership role in the coming years. He said it is equally true that India has made several developmental strides in the last few years. Work has been done to strengthen the infrastructure of the country. And then he referred to the earlier gas connection was a status symbol. Now the poorest of the poor have got access to it. Poor have got access to bank accounts. All these things he listed, which his government has done. But he said that specifically the COVID-19, he said the humankind had never seen a crisis like this in the last 100 years. And this crisis has changed its format and creating trouble for the people, and the entire country and world are fighting against it. So in that context, he listed the achievements like people of India have taken vaccine doses, and they have done this not merely to protect themselves but also to protect others. Then he listed all the details. When the pandemic broke out, people were wondering what will become of India and what will be the impact on world. But we have seen it's the willpower and discipline of the 130 crore people of this country that efforts of India are now being appreciated across the world. So like that, he went on giving details of the fight against COVID, and then he said that we all must focus on how to take India forward in the next 25 years when the country completes 100 years of independence. So that was a statesman-like reply to the debate in Parliament, listing all the achievements of his government. The second portion of his reply was an unsparing attack on the opposition, because the way opposition mounted criticism against his government, and some members even went to the extent of making personal attacks against him. And that reply also reflected the politician par excellence as far as Mr. Modi is concerned. So if we talk about the attack, he started the attack on the opposition by referring that some opposition parties had boycotted even an all-party meeting on COVID-19.
On the policy issues, because it was natural for the opposition to try and pick holes in the policies and the programs of the government and also its functioning. But the Prime Minister, in the first part of the speech, as you pointed out, actually listed out the amount of work that the government has done to shore up the economy at a time, as you rightly pointed out, and he said on the floor of the House, that a once-in-a-century pandemic that hit the world and the whole world was reeling under it. At such a time, the Indian resilience came up and tried to tell through Parliament to the country that here is the country which is ready and moving on while facing the downturn in terms of health pandemic. So I think that is where he wanted to underscore the work done by the government. Would you agree that?
Certainly, not only in fight against pandemic, also the way big boost has been given to economy and all the socio-economic projects and policies and programs of the government. And he listed most of these projects, including women empowerment, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and that he said is fulfilling his dream of Sabka Prayas. But I think one of the major takeaways of his reply in both houses was of course political, as I agree with you that opposition has a right to criticize the government on its policy, but personal attacks were also made.
Turns out what you said on the political aspect, in fact, if you recollect, in the Lok Sabha, he made a very pointed reference to the mindset of Congress in particular, saying once the party which played a role in what it says in the last 50 years, today is identified with a group kind of decimation of the Congress and its concerns, something which he repeated in the Rajya Sabha today in a different form and format when he actually counted the issues as you just pointed out. What would have the country been if Congress was not in power?
Certainly, because I think he was provoked by some of the references made by some Congress leaders, and that in fact prompted Prime Minister to reply in a similar tone. And he said that when you are referring to the mindset, he said democracy is not due to the Congress generosity. Even some people are not willing to accept nationhood. So in that context he was talking about. And it was again a very scathing attack when he said that had Congress ceased to be as per the wishes of Mahatma Gandhi, democracy would have been free from dynasty. India would have walked on the path of national resolution instead of taking to foreign view. And he said that he himself faced vilification by the Congress government when he was the chief minister. He said, my refrain was Gujarat should continue to work for the nation's development. Congress, he said, dismissed over 50 state governments during its rule at the center. That kind of attack was very unusual to see in Parliament, but I must say that he was provoked by some of the personal attacks and references made by the Congress.
Sir, what you said reminds that in the second part of his reply, both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, he was far too combative, as you said, because he was provoked by the personal attacks and also some of the ideological issues that the party or its members of the opposition parties raised in both the houses of parliament. In particular, today's list, as you mentioned, the 50 instances where Congress dismissed elected governments, that was more in reference to the attack on the federal nature because of the kind of the narration, the speeches that went on, especially as you said from the Congress benches. And today in Rajya Sabha, of course, the Congress is the principal party in opposition. He kind of told them, look, you are losing your own script.
Yes, of course. And if I may recall what he said in Lok Sabha yesterday, he jokingly said that he is accused of not mentioning Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And he said, today I will quote Pandit Nehru and repeatedly say what Nehruji has been saying. And he went on to quote from Nehru's Independence Day address and from his book Discovery of India to counter Congress remarks, the government's assertions on some of, certain constitutional issues. And he said, quoting Nehru from Red Fort, he said, India's first Prime Minister had thrown up his arms when it came to tackling inflation in those days and blamed the unrest in Korea and developments in the US for rising prices of essential commodities even when he was the Prime Minister. He said Nehru had made the remark when globalization was not in vogue and asserted that his government had succeeded in keeping food inflation in control despite the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nehru from Red Fort, when there was no globalization, and he said the war in Korea. So that is why prices increase and they go out of control. That is Nehru telling the nation. So in that context, he was replying to the attack as far as the price rise or inflation is concerned. And he again quoted Nehru on his book Discovery of India to assert the message of unity in diversity. So it was very extensive reply covering all aspects of the debate, not sparing the opposition attack. And today in Rajya Sabha, he went to the extent of telling congressmen that if there was no Congress, there would have been no caste politics. I think it was very calculated and I think attack to silence the opposition which has been trying to attack his government on various issues. And when we talk of economy and job creation, etc., he replied, he said, the MSME sector has provided highest employment. We have agriculture sector is also providing employment, and farmers are receiving higher MSP price. They are now receiving money directly into their banks. So all these aspects of Atmanirbhar Bharat, employment generation, and the defense corridor being set up in Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, MOUs are being signed, and then he repeatedly came back on the indirect dig at the opposition.
Before we wind up, I just need one more issue. Because today in Rajya Sabha, the Congress staged a walkout protesting on what was being said. But even after the Lok Sabha speech, the opposition has expressed the opinion that some of the issues which were to be flagged were missing in the president's address, and also that the government did not respond to some of the issues in the manner in which they thought he should have responded. So you have seen enough opposition members saying this over a period of time. So how justified is the Congress saying what it did?
Prime Minister answered the argument put forward by Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge when he was walking out. Prime Minister said that when Congress was in power, they did not allow the country's development. Now when they are in the opposition, they are obstructing the development of the country. They are now objecting to the idea of nation. And he said, if the idea of nation is unconstitutional, then why is your party called Indian National Congress? And concluding his speech, he said, I request all to continue believing in India's bright future. And therefore, he said, we should not miss the opportunity. And if we catch it, then this journey of 25 years will take us far. I think it was a subtle message to the opposition that they should be constructive in their approach. They should join hands with the government in taking the country forward as far as development is concerned.
Thank you, Tandon Sahab.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on motion of thanks to President's address. The participants were Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and K.V. Prasad, senior journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.